Keys, and today we're going to be talking about if you should really start an LLC. Now, before we get started, you already know the drill. I need you to kiss the like button with your finger and hit subscribe. Your professor is trying to reach 100,000 subscribers, and I can't do that without your help. Now, let's get to the lesson. LLCs are trending across the internet, and it appears as though everyone believes that you should own an LLC just to start a business. But is that entirely true? Before you start an LLC, I want you to consider these three things. Number one, if you're just starting out and your business is low risk, I would ask that you consider becoming a sole proprietor. A sole proprietor is the exclusive owner of their business, and they retain all of the profits from their business after they pay taxes, but they also assume 100% liability and also losses. Generally speaking, sole proprietors do business as themselves, as individuals, and that's why it's so cheap to start, because you don't have to pay any LLC fees. So let's talk about liability and losses, because sole proprietors are 100% responsible for that. Liability just means, what if something happens to your business, right? What if you get sued by one of your potential customers? Then that means that the courts can access your personal assets, right, in order to fulfill that debt. And if there are any losses and you can't actually pay those, then that means that they can again access your personal assets. And that's why I said, if you're starting a business, if it's low risk and you think that there's a very low probability that you're going to get sued, then you can delay getting an LLC until you're able to really prove that the concept of your business works. A few low risk businesses for you to consider include tutoring, drop shipping, virtual assistant services, life coaching, virtual online training, virtual personal training, drop shipping. These are all low risk businesses, and what that means is that there's a low probability that you might get sued. It's not a 100% guarantee, but you can get started with these businesses, and generally speaking, these particular entrepreneurs aren't going to court on a consistent basis, especially when they're just getting started. Also, the startup costs are pretty affordable. Now, this is not at all an exhaustive list, right? It's not exhaustive. There are more low risk businesses like considering these, some of which I already mentioned. And when you start these businesses, just think, what is the worst case scenario, right? So if you go into online tutoring and let's say a parent has hired you to teach their kid math, but instead you decide to teach them karate lessons, then guess what? They may be upset and they might want their money back. And if you don't have that money to pay them back, they may sue you. Number two, you need to learn how to start where you are, use what you have, and also do what you can. Smart small business entrepreneurs start small. In fact, the U.S. Small Business Administration says that the average small or micro business entrepreneur starts with about $3,000 of their own money. And guess what? It doesn't always cost $3,000 to get your business started. Sometimes you can get started for a much cheaper and lower cost. So these estimates are not absolute, they're just an average. My first business cost me about $500 to start. I used that $500 to create a logo, a website, printouts, food and beverage for the customers that I anticipated coming to my business. And that business was actually teaching classes about entrepreneurship to would-be entrepreneurs that wanted to start and scale their business and hopefully earn $50,000 in their first year. I bootstrapped, which means that I made sure that when I started my business that I paid the minimal cost in order to gain a maximum return. In my very first class of entrepreneurs, the revenue was $5,000 and my profit was $4,500. Not a bad deal, right? So again, you want to keep your costs low until you're able to generate profit consistently, because it's going to be these profits that pay for your future business expenses, to include your LLC fees. Now, your LLC fees are going to range from state to state. They're not the same across all states. In fact, if you live in New York City, the costs for starting an LLC include this, okay? And if you live in California, your costs include this. And if you live in the state of Virginia, shout out to the South, then your costs may look a lot like this. You can research how much it costs to start an LLC in your state by visiting your state corporation commission's website. So for example, if we were talking about California, you would type in California State Corporation Commission, and on that site, you'll be able to see how much it costs to file your paperwork in order to start an LLC, and also you'll see the cost to maintain that LLC year after year. Sometimes those costs are low, but other times those costs can be hundreds of dollars. So again, you want to make sure that whatever product or service that you're selling, that you're generating enough consistent profit in order to cover your future business expenses. And this is a perfect time to talk about the difference between revenue and profit, because sometimes entrepreneurs get that confused, right? So revenue is how much you earn. I paid $500 to host my first business class for one of my LLCs. $500, but I made $5,000. That $5,000 was my revenue. That's how much my students paid me in order to deliver a service. But profit would mean I would have to take that $5,000, subtract my $500 in startup expenses, and the remaining balance, which is $4,500, well, guess what? That would be my profit. So make sure you know the difference between the two, because sometimes your revenue may be just enough to cover your expenses, in which case you'll have to figure out a different strategy for your business. Now, before we get to number 3, I want to shout out this amazing docuseries that I just finished watching last weekend. It was produced by GoDaddy. What's so amazing about this docuseries is that it exclusively focuses on diverse entrepreneurs, and it tells their stories as small business owners. There are so many lessons to be learned when you watch their docuseries, which is why I totally binge watched it. Because you get to see their stories without filters. You get to see the ups, the downs, and also how they turn their business obstacles into profitable opportunities. I highly recommend that any small business owner watch this docuseries so they can pick up on those lessons that may be crucial during your first few years of business ownership. Listen, shout out to GoDaddy for telling inclusive stories about entrepreneurs. And if you want to check out this docuseries, click the link in my bio in order to watch all of the episodes. I promise you, binge-worthy, okay? Number 3, it's important for you to understand that there are opportunities that exist for sole proprietors. Even before you file any paperwork to become an LLC, a corporation, or even a partnership if that's what you so choose. One of those opportunities is you can absolutely apply for government contracts as a sole proprietor. As a sole proprietor, when you're applying for things like the DUNS number, which is a number that you need in order to apply for federal contracts, they'll ask you for things like if you filed taxes, do you have a tax identification number, and also a few other requirements. And this is mind-blowing because there are some government contracts that pay thousands of dollars, while there are other government contractors that pay millions of dollars. Also, when you're first getting started, the government is still open to doing business with you. Why? Because you filed your taxes, and the dollars that you pay every single year during tax year are the dollars that help fund the government and help it do its business. Also, as a sole proprietor, you absolutely qualify for tax write-offs. So when you file your Schedule C during your tax year, it's going to ask for you to report your business profits, but then also your business losses. When you report your business losses, you may have things that you report, such as the cost of a cell phone, laptop, internet, business mileage, business trips, business equipment like maybe a printer or a scanner. Maybe you even have a P.O. box, your home office. Maybe you also pay for contracting or consulting support, or maybe even educational services. These are all expenses that you may incur as a sole proprietor, and when you file those on your taxes, these can sometimes become write-offs. And these write-offs have the potential to either eliminate your tax bill or even reduce your tax bill. So make sure as a sole proprietor that you're keeping track of all of your expenses and you're working with a tax professional in order to identify those expenses that can absolutely be written off. Here's a comprehensive list of tax write-offs that I reference every single year. There's absolutely no shame in being a sole proprietor. In fact, starting off as a sole proprietor might be a smart move for some business owners. If you make the proper assessment on your risk level, your startup expenses, the type of customers that you plan to serve, and the type of business that you expect to do. If you like this video, leave me a comment and tell me. And if you made it this far, don't forget to kiss the like button with your finger and hit subscribe.